Orlando, Florida. You're now listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Orlando Magic fans. Join us every week for a unique fan perspective on all of the latest Magic news and updates. The show starts now.
Welcome back to another episode of the OZone Podcast, brought to you by DraftKings and part of the Basketball Podcast Network. We're your hosts, Al, myself, Anthony, and today is May 27th, and we're just a couple days after the start of the NBA playoffs. We're kind of midway through the first round, and in today's episode, we're going to talk a lot about kind of our future prospects, some exciting stuff happening in the future, kind of revisiting some basketball from the past. And then joining us to do that is Phillip Rossman-Reich, the site expert for Orlando Magic Daily and host of Locked On Magic. What's up, Phillip?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Great to be on the show.
Good. Really excited for you to be joining us. If you haven't listened to Phillip before in the past, Phillip, you do a really good job at really breaking down, analyzing the Orlando Magic, and you're really on the front line. So really going to almost every single game, covering the Magic live in person.
Yeah. It's if I have some scars like that, that's why it's been since I at least started covering the team. It's been pretty rough, but it's what we got to do, and it's a lot of work, but it's a labor of love. So I'm like you guys. I'm sure you're all very excited about the future. I'm very intrigued to see what happens next, and very excited about what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, Phillip, how long has it been since you've been covering the Magic exactly?
I mean, if we want to go all the way back, the whole reason I started writing was because of the Magic. But I've been writing for Orlando Magic Daily since the 2010 season when I was in college. And I've started covering games during the 2011 season, I believe. So it's been roughly a decade of going to Magic games and being at least part of the press corps, in addition to being an observer and writer.
Yeah, and since then, there's been a lot of rough times. How do you find yourself staying motivated through this whole last decade?
I mean, no lie. Like some of those days, especially late in the season, are really tough. I think there are some dark days in like the 2017 or 2016 season where I was just like, I'm literally just writing the same thing I wrote the previous day. And, I'm someone that cares like a lot about games. Like if you go to Orlando Magic Daily during the season, you'll see that I am like dedicating 2 whole posts to games. And, I feel, I know those don't get a ton of traffic, but I still feel like the games are super important and you have to acknowledge them in some way. And so it gets repetitive, especially late in the season when, kind of that spark dims out of the playoffs. But, I've always kind of viewed myself as an optimist. I know sometimes I kind of douse some water on some things or sometimes play devil's advocate, but I always view myself as an optimist. And, I believe, for lack of a better term. And so, this is my hometown team. This is really all I've known. So, I'm kind of in the trenches trying to figure out how to make this team as good as we can, as much as you can outside of the franchise and organization.
Yeah, and we know it's been challenging, right? So from 2010 till now, you saw the glory days, right? You had Dwight years a little bit towards the end of that run.
Little bit. Like I was there for the Dwight Mayer season. Like I was actually in school during the Dwight Mayer season, and I remember I was coming home from school. I was up at UF at Florida, and I was coming home from school for the weekend for Passover for family get together. And I was like driving home the day of the Magic Knicks game. So I wasn't there at shoot around. Of course, what happened at shoot around was the Stan Van Gundy press conference. And so I get home and I've got all these texts from writers from other sites and other teams, and they're like, what just happened? And I'm like, I have no clue. I've been driving for the last hour and a half. I have no clue what happened. And then I pop online and see what happened. I'm like, so that's the storm I'm walking into. So it's kind of it's a lot of stuff like that. So it's you got to kind of laugh some of it off sometimes, obviously. Like I remember when the Rob Hennigan whiteboard incident happened, I was actually it was the night after WrestleMania when it was in Orlando. So I was going to Raw that night, and I saw that coming down. I'm just like, this is just going to be bad. I'm going to just turn my phone off and boo the heck out of Roman Reigns for the next 30 minutes. So I'm not even going to think about it.
Man, it's probably by far one of the most awkward press conferences that we've or interviews that we've ever seen, because I see every once in a while the clips kind of just resurfaces. Until this day, I still cringe. It's just it was masterful of how awkward it was.
Yes, it was. I mean, and the worst part is, like, I mean, I don't know if I'm spilling any beans here. Like what Stan actually said was not really a secret. Like, no one was saying it on the record. No one was saying it in a way that you could report it. But everybody knew that happened. And so it was just like, I get what I think Stan underestimated what dropping that bombshell would do. Like, I think he was like, let's just get it out in the open. Let's kind of just not worry about it. And then Dwight, of course, makes it worse. And just, and honestly, hurting that more was that it was the Knicks were in town. So there's a lot of media in town anyway. Mm-hmm. And the game was on TNT. So it was just like the national media, like Stan Van Gundy could not have picked, like, unless he was intentionally trying to like drop a bomb on the franchise, could not have picked a worse time to do it. So, these stories to me, like, and I tell this to people all the time, like, the NBA is not about who wins the champion. Like, the NBA is the most predictable sport of any of the major sports that we have. It's about the journey getting there. So, like, these stories like these is what makes the NBA season enjoyable, as much grief as it gives everyone.
So I got to ask you then, so through all those years, the good, the bad that came in this run, any memorable moments that you can recall that you're like, man, like, I cannot forget that one moment. So anything that comes to mind?
The night that Tobias Harris hit the dunk against the Thunder, that game was just bonkers to begin with, and to finish it like that, like we know what the Magic are at that point. Like, the season was pretty much over. It was just a bunch of young guys, and that way that play developed with Oladipo, with the Durant missing the shot, Oladipo getting out in transition, giving it to Harkless, who just wanted nothing to do with the ball, and then giving it to Harris. The finish was crazy, but like a lot of, what happens for the media is we were up in the media loge on the second level. We have an elevator dedicated to us for the last 2 minutes of the game. So, like, if the game's a close game, we're all nervous because I don't have to file a story immediately after, but we're all nervous because we got to write what we're going to write before the press conference, and we got to get downstairs. But once that buzzer sounds, that media elevator is open to everyone. So literally that dunk happens. Me, Zach Oliver from Orlando Pinstripe Post, and I think Adam Papagiorgio or someone else from one of the other blogs, literally just minute the dunk goes down, close our computers, pick everything up, and run to the elevator so we can get downstairs to make sure that we're there in time for the press conference. And we're just screaming like, oh my God, like at the top of our lungs. Because I don't think I hide this. Like, I'm a reporter, I'm a blogger, but I'm still a fan at the end of the day. I try to put the fan hat away when I'm covering a team and talking about the team, but at the end of the day, like, I want the team to do well. So that was just an incredible moment and an all-time like Magic finish. It's just incredible that they won that game.
Yeah, and I remember that game when Mo Harkless passed the ball over to Tobias. It was that like split second in between that you're kind of like, why did you pass the ball? You're way too close to the basket to pass the ball, and the fact that it ended that way was definitely memorable. Now, let me ask you now, just because before we jump into the Magic basketball, and it was kind of out reported recently. With Stan Van Gundy, there was reports now that, the team right now, they're not, too happy with Stan Van Gundy. And being the type of personality that he had with us here in Orlando and seeing how it's kind of transpiring with New Orleans, is that surprising to you at all?
A little bit, but not completely. I think Stan is an incredible coach. Like, he's forgotten more about basketball than any of us are going to know in our lifetimes. And like, I think that his style can be very grating. Certainly kind of the yelling, the pressure, the intensity that he brings, it can get to teams, and especially young teams. Right. I tell people this all the time about Steve Clifford, and Steve Clifford teaches a lot of the same principles that Stan Van Gundy does, but he's not kind of the screamer and yeller. Like, he seems like a gruff dude, but like he's a lot more encouraging. He'll take, he'll take a guy by the side and kind of talk to him and communicate real well. Stan is a yeller, and you're never going to change that about him. And, I think about it this way, like Steve Clifford, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but Steve Clifford is a really good coach at building a foundation. What we don't know is whether he can take a team from the first round to the second round. I'm a big believer that, like players, coaches have roles in the process too. And Stan Van Gundy, we showed in Detroit with another young team, he wasn't really good at getting them to learn how to win. He's really good with teams like Miami and Orlando, who already had kind of a base established and already kind of understood the basics of winning. He's really good at taking those teams to the next level. Now, obviously, the next level for Stan is like, can he win a championship? That was always the big question. And honestly, like the job he did in Orlando, I think shows that he could. But obviously the roster never matched with him. And I think he got out coached a little bit in that 2009 finals, but that's a debate for another day. But I think Stan's message doesn't get to young players who don't know how to win yet. They don't understand how hard it is. And so it's almost like he's speaking a different language. Like he's telling Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram how to win at a 301 level when they're still on 201. And obviously, right. Like if you've ever been in a class, if you don't know the stuff that comes before it, you're going to be completely lost when you get to the higher level stuff. So, the messaging could probably be a little bit clearer. Again, I'm not saying that Stan's a bad coach. Like I think to some extent, maybe this generation has passed him by, like we kind of saw with Scott Skiles, who's a very similar kind of gruff coach, very demanding coach. This generation it doesn't respond to yelling in the same way that, maybe the previous generation did. Like, when we think about coaches, we think about taskmasters. That's not how coaching is. That's not how these kids have been coached. And so, you don't know how they'll respond to that kind of confrontation. And I think that kind of culture change is something that a lot of coaches in this league are dealing with. And we're seeing some of them kind of phase out. And honestly, unfortunately, Stan may be one of them.
Yeah, and it's surprising because even now, me personally, as a fan, I still respect Stan Van Gundy a lot, and I thought that was projected pretty well across the league. So kind of hearing JJ Redick when he first signed with the Pelicans and found out that Stan Van Gundy was going to be his coach, he kind of made some smart remarks, kind of being really candor and also,
you got to be careful with JJ because he can be very dry with his humor. Like that, I took that as just he's joking.
Yeah, I took it as he was joking as well, but there was a lot of truth to it. Like you can tell that he found it funny. As a familiar coach, but at the same time, he was not looking forward to kind of just reliving that time with Stan Van Gundy. So that was definitely interesting to see. Now, let's get into talking Magic basketball, current Magic basketball. So this past week, we had some tie breaking that needed to get done. We were tied 8, 9, and 10 with it was who was it? Was it
New Orleans,
Minnesota?
Sacramento, Chicago.
New Orleans, yes. So Magic ended up, kind of coming out of it. Chicago Bulls ended up getting that 8th best lottery odds. What does that mean exactly? Do we see that as good news? I've seen a lot of people kind of saying that it's a little too close, a little too risky. How do you see that kind of playing out?
So, I owe everyone this post and I owe everyone this on my podcast. But it's really important to remember how the lottery actually works. The lottery is, like we all play Tankathon. I know on our agenda, we're going to play Tankathon here in a little bit, but it's not just you hit a button and they spit out the result. The lottery is how they do the lottery is they have the numbers 1 through 14 in a drum. They draw 4 numbers out. So, what you're playing for is a certain number of combinations. So the Magic, as one of the worst 3 teams in the league, they have 140 number combinations. So when you have these tiebreakers, you're doing 2 things. The first thing you're doing is you're determining the order of these teams if they're outside the lottery. So if they don't win the lottery. So if the Bulls lose the lottery, they get 8th over Sacramento, or they beat Sacramento and New Orleans if they also miss the lottery. So in that sense, good win for the Magic, because the difference between picking 8th and picking 10th is pretty big. So, if nothing changes in the lottery, the top 4 teams remain the top 4 teams, the Magic will get the 8th pick. So that's very, very good. The other important thing to remember, and I think this was where some of the miscommunication, some of the confusion is when teams are tied in the standings. And I joked about this during the last parts of the season, how I wanted the 5-way mega tie for the 3rd worst record in the league. What happens when teams are tied is they share the lottery odds for their spot. So the Bulls have the 8th best odds of winning the lottery, but so do Sacramento and so do New Orleans. They split those odds evenly. Sometimes that there is an odd number. So what the tiebreaker also does, so the tiebreaker not only assigns the number combination. So the Bulls get the first set of, I think it's 21 number combinations. I think they have a 2.1% chance of winning the lottery. They get the first set of 21. Sometimes there is an odd number. So the team that wins that tiebreaker gets the odd number. That didn't happen here. There's all three teams get the same number of odds. So Chicago, New Orleans, and Sacramento all have the same odds of winning the lottery. Just Chicago gets the first set of numbers, and if they don't win the lottery, they go first among those three teams. So again, like I joke with people all the time who don't have a clear understanding of what the lottery is. It's a very good day for the Magic, unless the Bulls won the lottery because they got those sets of numbers. So we'll see what happens. But all in all, like that was a good break for the Magic, because there's a roughly 4 and 5 chance that the Magic are going to get that pick. And there's, I think, almost a 2 and 3 chance, or a little bit more than a 2 and 3 chance it's going to be 8 or 9. So the Magic look like they'll have a second top 10 pick in this draft.
Yeah, and I think that comes in huge. Not only in the chance of, hey, we're going to draft a good player at that range, but hey, what if you want to trade that pick at some point, or hey, you want to package it with someone else? It just sounds so much better when you say I have the 8th or 9th pick in my possession than the 10th. It's just something that just in your mind, it sounds better. So I think that can also help the Magic if that's the route they want to take, is package that pick for something different than a young player.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's another tool in the tool chest. I mean, I think that's when you're, especially when you're kind of starting a rebuild, what you want is just tools in the tool chest. I mean, Orlando's done a very good job. They don't owe their draft picks to anybody. They own all their picks. That's a huge asset for them. They also have the Denver pick now. They also have the 2 Chicago picks now. They've got that $17 million trade exception that they can play around with. So, and then they got a lot of young guys. I mean, I don't know what value Mo Bamba would still have, but even a guy like RJ Hampton probably has some value around the league now with how he played to end the season. And Gary Harris should have a market. Terrence Ross can have a market. The Magic have some flexibility to do some things if they want to get active in the trade market.
Yeah, and then they're saying that this draft coming up is supposed to be a very elite draft. When we take a look at the players in this draft, or around the top 5, who are you liking? There's a lot of talks on, best player available, best fit. There's debates going left and right between, Jalen Green, Mobley. Who is it that you're kind of hoping that kind of lands in our favor?
I mean, obviously you want the number 1 pick. I think Cade Cunningham is far and away the best player in this draft class. I think that he has a really, I mean, you talk a lot, you hear people talk a lot about a feel for the game. He has a really good feel for the game. And he has the ability to take over. I remember watching his first game at Oklahoma State. I was actually at work, and I had the TV on to my left, and I looked out the corner of my eye, and Cade had thrown this one-handed pass all the way to the corner off the dribble. And I kind of stopped what I was doing and was like, whoa, like that's not something that a freshman player in his first college game. And you know how those college games are. Those first games, they usually play some pretty good competition. That's not a pass that a freshman makes right off the bat like that. He's got the ability to score off the bounce. He can get to the basket. He's a smart passer. I don't know if he is surefire Hall of Fame, like runaway superstar player, I don't know if he's like kind of, no one, he's not LeBron, Zion, Anthony Davis level good, but he's going to be very, very good in this league for a very, very long time. And I think he's far and away the top guy. And the fun thing about this draft is it feels like there's at least 4 other guys who have star potential and just very clear star potential. And so again, like you look at Orlando and the decision they made at the trade deadline, if there was a year to kind of go all in on a draft and take that risk that you'll get a good draft pick, it feels like it would be this draft. I still have to watch some more Evan Mobley, but I'm leaning more towards Jalen Green as my number 2 guy, just because you look around the league, having guys who can score off the dribble and work the perimeter is just so important. And this isn't, and maybe this is me being a little scared from Mo and how much Mo has struggled to adjust to the NBA. It feels like you're better off building around your wings and finding centers later in the draft who are just kind of grinders. Like you look at the teams, like obviously there's Jokic and Embiid, but Davis plays power forward for the most part. So honestly, Vucevic might be the 3rd best pure center in the league. And, you can find skilled guys like that. I'm not saying that they're not out there, but especially when you're just kind of building your team, it really feels like the way this league is going, you need wings. You got to have like strong wings if you're going to have a chance to win. And I think that's I think that's something, obviously that's something this Magic team is missing. They got some great point guards. They got some good lead guards. They got some great kind of bigger wings, but they need guys who can score on the perimeter. And so I really lean toward Jalen Green as my number 2 guy. I think Suggs is a little too much of a point guard. I'm curious how he'll play. And again, I'm not against, like, you look at the way the league's going too. I'm not against having multiple ball handlers on the floor either. I think that's a really smart, I think that's a sound strategy to have multiple guys who can attack off the dribble. You just need the shooters to surround them, which obviously the Magic don't really have right now. But you just need to get talent. And so especially with that first pick, you don't worry so much necessarily about fit. I mean, you worry about it a little bit. Like, I did a mock draft with the Locked On Podcast Network, where we're going to be doing, I think, a mock draft every week, it sounds like, until the lottery. And I got the 5th pick and I got left with Kuminga. And I'm like, I got to take Kuminga. He's the best player on the board. I can't say no to that. The next best guy is Scotty Barnes on my board. And I just think Kuminga is a better player. But I would worry if they took Kuminga. You have Isaac, you have Okiki. Where's Kuminga going to get his minutes? Where's he going to develop? This is a pick that's got to be kind of a foundational piece. You don't want to kick it down the road to next year. So, you got to worry a little bit about fit, but it can't be all consuming. You got to find a way to get the 5 best players you can on the floor. And so, especially that high in the draft, you just take the best guy that you can and figure it out from there.
Yeah. And Al's been pretty high on Jalen Green, and just playing devil's advocate. I've been open to Mobley for the simple fact that as much as I really like Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba is still, in my opinion, a question mark. But Wendell, in Chicago, injury was always a concern. And if you're looking at Mobley, if that were the case, if you were to add a player like Mobley, what do the Magic do with Mo Bamba at that point? Because it's already because I've always felt with Mo Bamba, it's always been a confidence issue along with everything else, right? The confidence, that part hasn't been added to his game and his overall health. But if you add a player like Mobley to the roster, how does that impact Mo Bamba?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely pushes him a little bit out of the way and pushes him to the side. And I think as good as Wendell played, and I think he played really well. I think there are real questions about Wendell too, about whether he can be a long-term starting center. I kind of watched him play, and I'm like, I really like a lot of his game, but am I going to be able to build a defense around him as my starting center? And I kind of said, he's like, if he could have Derek Favors' career, where he's a really solid bench center, can start when you need him to. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but the Magic will have a question to ask themselves, because he's a restricted free agent at the end of the season. Like, how much are you willing to invest in him? And if the question is, I don't know right now, then, you can't take Mobley off your board. I think that, if Mobley's the second or third best guy on your board and you're drafting there and he's available, you got to take him. You got to get talent in the building, and to win in this league, you need elite talent. And if you feel that Mobley's going to be better than Carter and certainly better than Bamba, you got to take them. I don't think that there's any way to get around that. That's at the end of the day, talent wins in this league. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this as I watched the play-in tournament. I watched, teams get eliminated from the playoffs. Culture only gets you so far. You got to have the talent to go with that culture. And again, you look at the Magic the last 2 years under Clifford, they have the culture. They have a way that they play. Everyone believes in that way to play. But at the end of the day, they can't beat Kawhi Leonard. They can't beat Giannis Antetokounmpo. You got to find those elite guys. You got to be elite at something. And, as much as I think Nikola Vucevic was verging on that, but, on this roster today, the only guy with an elite talent is Jonathan Isaac, in my opinion. I think he's the only guy that really feels completely untouchable, because he can do something, better than pretty much all but maybe 3 or 4 players in this league. Like, I think next year will be the last year Jonathan Isaac's not on all defensive team. Who else are we saying about that, being able to win awards and be on those kind of all NBA season teams. So the Magic can't be married to anyone. Obviously if I'm Mo, this is my first healthy summer. I gotta be in the gym every day. I gotta be working every day, improving my game, studying film, trying to understand, playing even as much as I can so I can understand how to be where I need to be defensively and working on some of those things defensively that he really struggles with. Because ultimately what was always going to make his way in the league and what's going to get him playing time with Coach Clifford is that he defends and understands the defensive concepts and defensive schemes. And you're right, confidence was a huge issue. He just never had the time consistently to play. But he's got to put that time in. And if, honestly, if I'm Mo, I'm in the gym all of June. I'm in the Amway Center all of June. I'm making sure, Jeff Weltman in his office upstairs, Steve Clifford in his office upstairs see the gains that I'm making so that when they sit down for their draft meetings, they say, well, we think Mo is getting ready to take this step up. We got to at least think about it.
Yeah, I think that's the hope for all Magic fans, right? We want to see that Mo take it to the next level because, again, it's going to help us tremendously if he can take that next leap that we all expect him to take. Going back to the draft for a second. So I keep saying it, wishful thinking. I keep saying we're going to end up with Cade or we're going to end up with Jalen Green. That's just my mindset, and I'm not going to change.
The secret man.
Yes. So if that is the case, that's right. So if that is the case, say we end up with one of those two guys. Now we have the 8th pick. Again, wishful thinking. That stays the same. We have the 8th pick. What would you do in that case with that Bulls pick if you were running the Magic? Do you think the Magic keep it and get another young guy? Or do you think that that's one that will consider possibly packaging Ross, someone else, for a veteran?
I mean, it might depend on who's available and what the Magic think of the players available. I think one of the reasons the Magic made the trade with Vucevic was because they liked the value of the guys later in the lottery in this draft. Because, I assumed that the Magic, when they traded Vucevic to the Bulls, they probably believed that pick was going to be like 11, 12, like the Bulls would be in the play-in tournament and they'd get like one of the tail end picks in the lottery. The fact that this is a top 10 pick now is just frankly gravy. I think that was completely unexpected. Again, like I said, you can't turn down talent. You need talent in the building. So if there's guys that you like, and there, I think one of the things about this draft is there's those top 5 guys. And then, maybe there's a drop off where you don't have all-star caliber players, but you got a lot of guys that can fill roles on teams. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of guys that I think you can really like later, like in that range where the Magic are going to be picking. So I don't anticipate that the Magic would look to trade that pick again, unless the return is just killer, unless, they're getting a first back, they're getting a high quality veteran back, someone that makes them believe that, okay, we can make the playoffs now. Like this is a team that can make the playoffs instead of a team that, is just going to be a young team growing. And I think the Magic are going to be, very careful, but they need to bring veterans in too. I agree with that as well. But it would depend on the deal and would depend on the players available. And my instinct tells me that there's players at that level of the draft, guys, I don't think Scotty Barnes will fall that far, but you got your Trey Mans, you got your Moses Moody's, you got Keon Johnson, even someone like Josh Giddy. I think I'm trying to put him on people's radars, although I think that might be a little high for him. There are a lot of high quality players, kind of skilled players that could fit a roster that could go around that time. So again, this team is so far at the beginning stages. They got to add talent. Yes, they need veterans, but they got a coach that will teach them the right things. And they got, Isaac and Fultz have been around long enough too. Maybe maybe they're more veteran than we think, but they gotta bring talent, get talent in the building. And so I think that would be tough to give away that opportunity unless the deal was like really good.
And that's a great point, but it also makes me wonder. So we're coming off a season where we had Cole Anthony, Chuma Okeke, RJ Hampton, essentially 3 rookies this past season. Adding hopefully a top 5 pick, hopefully the Bulls pick conveys, and then that 33rd pick. Could you see there being an issue with there just being too many young guys?
Oh, for sure. And I think one of the issues the Magic are going to face is that they don't have enough time for all these young guys to play.
Right.
Because Clifford's going to play veterans. Like if Clifford's still the coach, Gary Harris is going to play. Terrence Ross is going to play. I would suspect that they'll try and use the mid-level exception to bring in a center, bring in another veteran big, unless they draft one. They'll probably use that MLE to bring in another veteran and just kind of support the roster. It's going to be crowded. I mean, let's say the Magic take Cade. Cade is a 1-2. He's a point guard or a shooting guard. Maybe he can play some small forward, but that means your starting lineup is Markelle, Harris, maybe Okiki at the 3, Isaac, maybe it's Markelle, Cade, Harris, Isaac, and Carter. You're bringing Hampton and Cole off the bench. So someone's getting squeezed out there because Clifford's going to stick to a 9-man rotation when his team's healthy. So Isaac, I think, will be in and out of the lineup, but like Okiki already, unless he can shift down to the 3 is going to be coming off the bench. Like there's already a little bit of a roster crunch with how many young guys there are. Again, like you said about Mo, like you need a backup center. If you're going to go out and get Mobley, or if you're going to go out and sign another one, is Mo even going to have a time on the roster to play again? Like I think it is a very real problem. I think that there's a roster crunch coming. And I think the instinct to say, well, maybe the Magic can trade that pick or get some asset for it, I think is an accurate one to have. And I think is one that the Magic have to consider. Again, I think you get talent in the building and you figure it out later, but I agree completely that there is a little bit of a problem. And my big concern for next year is that the team's just going to be too young.
Now, talking about the young guys that we currently have, right? 2 guys, again, were rookies this season, Cole Anthony and Chuma Okiki. A lot was expected of them. A lot was put on their plate, I think, than we all anticipated, simply because of the injuries and everything that took place with the team this season. So what we saw from those players, you in particular, what are your thoughts on Cole Anthony and Chuma Okiki, not only this past season, but going forward with the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're both competitors. Number one, like they both competed really hard all year long. And I think that's obviously the first thing you want to see from young players. I say this about Summer League. Summer League, you find out who can't play more than who can play. Rookie years, I think, are kind of the same thing. Like you just need to see a little bit of what they can do. Once Cole got confident, on both times, like once he's in the starting lineup a lot earlier than I think the Magic wanted him to be. And he struggled, but then he found his footing and he was playing really well. And then the injury hit. He needed a couple games to find his footing, and then he played really well to end the season. Obviously had a green light to shoot a lot more, but I thought that he played really, really well, and you saw his competitiveness and you saw his fire and his ability to get to the basket. And as he improves his 3-point shot, I think he can be a really valuable player. He's still got a lot of work to do. I think his shots, like in college, his shot selection still needs some improvement, but a lot of that again was the Magic kind of had to push him into this role where he was a primary scorer. Okiki is just solid. I was really impressed with his defensive understanding very, very early on. And as he got more confident with his 3-point shot, you could see what a weapon that could be. And, I think the thing that Okiki struggled with was defenses started shifting how they defended him, trying to force him to put the ball on the floor a little bit more. And that's where he started to struggle a little bit. Like he gained the respective defenses for that little run that he had when he came back from his injury. So, I thought both showed that they can play in this league. Both obviously have to continue improving and getting better, but they did a lot of really good things and they were obvious bright spots for this team. And again, if they were healthy, if they had Markelle the whole year, if they had even Isaac the whole year, I think both would have been really big, really good contributors to a team that was fighting for the playoffs.
Yeah. And you mentioned a lot, and what I took from that is, putting us in a situation where we may have too many young guys. There may be some players that won't be able to be as developed as others. That's a good problem to have because, as you said, we're trying to get as much talent in the building and then kind of go from there. But then you brought up another good point where, we really don't want to get married to anyone specific. With the drafting of Cole Anthony, with the drafting of Chuma Okiki, that they really panned out. This trade deadline, the front office made a lot of moves, and there was a lot of criticism from the fan base that this front office, they're not doing anything, they're kind of sitting on their hands, whatever the case may be. From your perspective, has your opinion on the front office changed at all?
No, I mean, I think that they've been empowered to do a lot more than any previous front office the Magic have had. I think the amount of resources that the DeVos family has given them is a lot more than we've seen from any previous management group. I think Pat Williams was kind of the founder of the team, but he didn't really he kind of built the beginning teams and then ceded over to John Gabriel after the 95 run. Otis Smith, I think, had a lot of freedom and had a lot of trust. I think that it was his word that pulled the trigger on the Gilbert Arenas trade. I think there was some skepticism in the ownership about that move, and Otis they trusted Otis to do that. But the amount of resources that the Magic, again, they built the arena. That's a huge thing. The amount of resources they've kind of given and the decision-making power they've given Weltman, I think is more than any point in Magic history. And I think one underrated thing that a lot of Magic fans aren't talking about or thinking about is the new practice facility that's gonna open up in January. Again, when the Amway Center opened, it was the state of the art. It was everyone was modeling what they built after the Amway Center. But now that there's this move back to separate training facilities, just so there can be a little bit more room, the Magic are going to have kind of the state of the best facility in the league. So, I think that was probably something that, I think that may have been something that was talked about before Weltman got here, but I'm sure that Weltman was a big reason why that got done, or Weltman saying, hey, we need this to be the team that we want to be, and be the organization that we want to be. But I think obviously there's always an appetite to make trades. And I like how Weltman, he has an idea of what he wants, and obviously has an idea of the players that he likes. But he's not going to be beholden to like a preset plan. I think with Rob Hennigan, there was a preset plan. They were going to be bad for 2 years, and then they were going to go. And I think that they picked the wrong coach, off the bat. No offense to Jacques Vaughn, that job was just a little too much for him. And the Magic kind of stuck him out there to take all the arrows, and then when they collected all their talent, they weren't able to move forward. They just didn't have the right voice to kind of push them forward. I think Weltman, when he came in, was planning to do the kind of teardown that he did this summer, or this trade deadline. But he got there. He hired Steve Clifford, who was the right coach. They were playing well. They saw something that would enable them to get back to the playoffs. And yeah, sure, maybe some business interests took over where we have an all-star. We can't trade our all-star. I think the plan when he got here was this is probably our only year with Vucevic, and then we're gonna move him. But they didn't like any deals they got. They were happy to kind of stick with the path they made, and they made the playoffs. And I think to some extent they were victims of their own success. But at that point, the ideas that we had about how to build this team up began to shift, and we were thinking, okay, now X, Y, and Z needs to happen. Now Aaron Gordon has to kind of take that star leap, or someone has to take that leap so the Magic can be in discussions to trade for the next star. I think the fact that the Magic were at one point favored to acquire Russell Westbrook, when the Rockets were looking to deal him, to me, that was exactly the plan. Like, Russell Westbrook may not have been the right guy for the Magic. Again, I think that's a fair debate, especially with how Westbrook played this season, probably a lot better than I think everyone anticipated. We can certainly debate whether that would have been the right move for how to move forward. But the fact that the Magic were in those conversations, to me, shows that the plan worked. Now, obviously things fell apart, and Weltman said, we've taken this as far as we can. We got to restart. We got to blow it up. And I think he had the trust from management to do so. So, obviously now the pressure's on Weltman. He's got to get this draft right. I mean, you put a lot of eggs in in the basket of this draft. So you need to get at least one player that can define your franchise. Like, this is the moment. And if the Magic mess up this draft, it's going to be a long haul, and Weltman's job will be in a little bit of danger. I think, he obviously didn't make the moves he made at the trade deadline without ownership's approval. Like Alex Martin's, probably even the DeVos family probably had to say, yeah, like we get this plan. We like this plan. Go for it. You don't make those moves and the flurry of moves you make without ownership signing off. If they didn't sign off on it, you're going to be out of a job. that's the truth. I think obviously now we're going to really see Weltman do his work and see if Weltman is as good as we kind of think he is. Honestly, his decision not to make moves was a decision in itself. And I think obviously you make the playoffs 2 straight years after not making it for 6. I think they worked out. I think they ended up being the right decision. And when he decided there wasn't a way to move forward from building in the middle, he made bold moves to tear it down, and I think got pretty good returns on all of those players.
Yeah, I think looking back as a Magic fan, you cannot be upset as to what we got from an asset standpoint, not only the young players, but also, again, the flexibility that we now have, whether it's draft picks, whether it's cap space. There's just so many things that came by those trades. So like you, I think we've discussed this at length in our podcast the last few weeks. thankful is the word that comes to mind of the job they did, making this happen. This kind of rebuild, but in a way, again, it's just a refresh look for the Orlando Magic altogether. So Phil, you mentioned earlier, we're going to go ahead here now and play what we called Let's Play the Lottery. And we're going to go ahead and bring Tankathon to the screen here. And again, like we've said it last week to our listeners, we're going to put you on the spot of the front office and say, hey, if this were to happen, what will you do? So we have the site here pulled up. Let me go ahead and sim the lottery and let's see what happens.
Phillip, you feeling lucky?
Apparently not.
Man, back-to-back weeks. So for those not watching on YouTube, the Magic ended up with the 5th pick, and the Magic ended up dropping 1 and drafting 9th with the Bulls pick. So,
which I will add that it was better than last week's sim, because last week's sim we were at 6, so at least we went up a spot.
That's right.
Hey, like I tell everyone, waste all these where the Magic lose the lottery now. You know, you want to be peaking like it's the playoffs. You want to be peaking at the right moment. So like today, month out from the lottery, get those 5s and 6s out of the way now.
All right. So in this scenario, Phil, what would you do? So you're again in the front office of the Magic. You get the 5th pick and the 9th pick. What are you doing?
I mean, it obviously depends on what teams ahead of you do. If could you pull up the draft board again? I think you just got to play it out a little bit. Detroit's taken Cade Cunningham's going 1. Houston probably takes, between Houston and San Antonio, Mobley and Green are probably gone. Cleveland would probably really hope for Mobley. I would think like if this were the scenario, Cleveland would be a team that might take Kuminga and leave Suggs to Orlando. Because obviously Cleveland's got guards. They got 2 young guards and Sexton and Darius Garland, Sexland as they're called. And I'm sure they don't want to load up on guards like that. So this scenario, like 5th to me, the Magic picking 5th is like it's not a doomsday scenario, but it's not ideal. Because I do think there's a top 4. I think that Cade, Mobley, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs are a clear top 4 to me. And Kuminga is ahead of the next batch, but is like not so far from, it's closer to the front pack than the trailing pack, but to me is behind those 4. But if Cleveland somehow got ahead of Orlando and didn't have a chance to draft Mobley, and then again, they got Jared Allen, so maybe they wouldn't even draft Mobley. Maybe they would always be on Kuminga, but they feel like a team that would prefer Kuminga over any of the guards. And so in this scenario, I think the Magic end up with Jalen Suggs at 5. And I think that would be the rose-colored glasses or the blue-tinted colored glasses of this scenario at least. 5. If the Magic draft 5, I'd be worried, and I would think that the Magic would at least very seriously talk and consider, how can we move up? How can we make sure we are in that top 4, even if we have to give up a ton? Something I've kind of learned about the draft, and a draft philosophy that I've kind of taken is always take the best player available, worry about fit, fit matters and maybe separating guys within tiers, but take the best guy on your board. But B, if there's someone you really like, no matter what it costs, go get him. Especially with your team like the Magic. Like if you lose Terrence Ross or Gary Harris, I like those guys. They're not as important as getting the guy that you care about in this draft. I think about what, Utah did with Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell was traded from the Nuggets. I believe the Nuggets drafted Donovan Mitchell, and the Jazz traded up to get him. That was their guy. They made sure they got him. Kawhi with the Spurs. The Pacers drafted Kawhi Leonard. The Spurs were like, we got to have this guy. They went out and got him. And obviously those guys were taken in like the 14th, 15th, like in the late lottery. But nonetheless, like I think it's a really important strategy that if there's someone that you absolutely love, go get him. Don't mess around. Go get him. And so I think that's something the Magic, again, if they end up outside the top 5, package 5 and 9. Who cares? Go get your guy.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the fan base are really focusing on the top 5 for obvious reasons. But there's still a lot of really, really good players past that 5. So who are you selecting with the 9th pick in this scenario?
Obviously it's tough without like mocking it fully out. I think Oklahoma City probably takes Scotty Barnes. He's probably my next guy. I would hope that Moses Moody drops to Orlando at 9. I really like Moody. He's the guard from Arkansas. He's being described as kind of a prototypical 3-and-D. And I think that's probably his ultimate role in the NBA. He's a good shooter, but he's also got the ability to shoot a little bit off the bounce. Like he was the leading scorer for a very good Arkansas team. And I think in the NCAA tournament, what happened, he struggled in the tournament, but I think what happened was a lot of defenses just really focused on stopping him and really crowding him. And I don't think he's a guy that can be a number one option, but I think that he's a guy who can be a solid 3-and-D guy. He has good size to be a defender. And he can be a guy that can take the ball off the dribble a little bit. So he's not just a one-dimensional offensive player. And that's, I think, really big for 3-and-D guys. Like he's sort of more like a bigger Will Barton maybe, or like I don't think he's as gifted as a scorer as Jordan Clarkson, but like if you can fit him into those kinds of roles, I think that obviously that's really beneficial. And I think that would be really good. So with that 9th pick, I'm really hoping that Moses Moody drops to Orlando. I'd be looking at Corey Kispert, who I think is the best shooter in the draft. I think you got to have Trey Mann on your list. Franz Wagner is kind of a traditional small forward. He can shoot it a little bit. He'll probably be gone by the time the Magic draft at 9 too. And so those were the guys I'd be looking at. And, like I said, I think that you have to put some odd guys on the radar. I like Keon Johnson. I think he's a really good scorer. His shooting percentages in college really concern me though. Cause obviously the Magic need shooting. So, I don't want a guy that needs the ball in his hands at that 9th pick, because the Magic have plenty of guys like that. They need shooters. They need guys who can spread the floor. So you need to be able to do something to help your teammates, or you need to be able to shoot the ball really well. So like, I don't have Keon Johnson off my board by any means, but I definitely am a little wary of him unless his shot drastically improves. Because again, the Magic just have a lot of guys who can score a little bit on their own, but they need shooters around them to be really effective. The one guy that I am trying to put on people's radars, I kind of went off board in our first mock draft run through on Orlando Magic Daily, is Josh Giddy. He's a 6'8" forward. He led the NBL in Australia in assists this year. So again, you're looking at a 6'8" forward with playmaking ability. Like you need something unique. You need something that teams have to figure out how to defend and kind of takes them out of their normal defense. I think I've seen Giddy going anywhere from like 10 to like in the 20s in mock drafts. So retaking him at 9 would be a little bit of a reach. But again, like I said, the Magic have shown they're willing to take stretches on guys. Chuma Kiki, as much as Jeff Weltman wants to make us believe that teams behind them were ready to take him, I don't believe that. I think that the Magic, were willing to gamble on Okiki. They knew that he was willing to sit out the year and defer his contract, which I think was a big reason why they took him too. But Okiki, I think, was their guy, and they were willing to say, you know what, everyone has him in the 20s. We're taking him at 15. He's our guy. We're not deviating from that. So. I would keep Giddy on your radar. Again, the issue with Giddy is, yes, he is not a great jump shooter. I think he shot sub 30% on threes, but sort of like LaMelo Ball was the guy who led the NBL in assists last year. The NBL is not a joke of a league. It is a very good league. I think outside of Euro League and maybe Greece or Spain, as far as international leagues, the NBL is right there. It's a top 5, top 6 league in the world. So to have an 18-year-old who led the league in assists there and can play very clearly play, professional basketball already. I think Giddy is someone that you have to have on your radar.
So then with that being said, because for the most part, you can kind of predict, 1 through 5, we know that it's going to be those players. I can't see anyone else in the draft kind of jumping and taking away any of the top 5. But with you covering the team as long as you have, how much or how important are these now workouts that these prospects are going to be doing with the team to the front office? You mentioned that, Chuma Kiki was a player that, they liked, so they got him. And you kind of, the execs, they'll take these workouts, and then that's kind of how you fall in love and you select who that guy is for you. Do you see that kind of any adjustments with, what may or could happen with Magic, depending on the workouts and their interviews?
I think especially this year, the interviews and whatever time one-on-one that teams get with players is going to be really, really important. A lot of the, like if you've heard Matt Lloyd on any podcast that he's done or Jeff Weltman talk about the draft this year, was really weird for a lot of those scouts. Usually those scouts, the Magic's draft scouts, are out in the field watching games. And because of COVID protocols, they weren't allowed to really talk to coaches. They weren't allowed to attend practices. They weren't allowed to kind of get the intelligence information that they might normally get over the course of the season. I think some schools allowed them to kind of watch from the stands, but just see games and not, get kind of the on the ground information that they need. I joke about it a lot, but, being a GM of a team is like running a mini intelligence agency. You're trying to figure out what other teams are thinking, but you also have all these scouts on the ground around the world really that are feeding you information on these players. And, like last year's draft class, was fine because most of the college season had already been done by the time everything shut down. So they'd gathered a lot of kind of that on the ground information. And, maybe there were a few things they wanted to find out from watching a workout or from interviewing a player. But, again, they were limited on how they could do that. Obviously I think the Magic were able to have a meal with Cole Anthony. I think he was one of the players that they interviewed and they were able to watch his watch him work out. But, they obviously couldn't bring people into their building. The way you think about these draft workouts is it's the job interview. And I always say the workout isn't as important as the sit down with ownership, or sit down with management, and the ability to kind of talk to the person as much as figure out who the player is. And so this year is going to be, I think this year that process is going to be more important than ever, because most of their scouts don't, and this is across the league, so it's not like the Magic are at some disadvantage, but they haven't had the ability to sit down, talk to the coach, talk to the training staff of each individual school, talk to people around these players in the same way that they normally would. So there's probably, when you probably look at the player profiles, the playing part, they probably have down pat. They probably have an understanding of what their games are like from watching the college tape and reviewing that college tape. What they don't have down is probably who these players are as people and how they work. What are their work ethics like? And that's what they really have to find out here from the draft interview process. And that's going to make it more important than ever that players really impress and really make it clear who they are as people and what kind of people they're bringing into the organization.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what it is that they do and the decisions that they make. I think the most exciting about it all is that it's literally right around the corner. So, we can start the countdown now, keep doing the simulations on a day-to-day basis. And like you said earlier, just get all the bad simulations out.
Get all the fives and sixes out now. Let's go
ahead and do that now. All right. So, Phillip, we're going to transition into this or that. All right. This is the first time that we do it on the podcast. Pretty simple. We're going to give you two options, and you're just going to select from the two options, and we're going to kind of do it on rapid fire. So the first one, if you can keep one player between Gary Harris or Terrence Ross, who would it be?
I think it would be Terrence Ross. And I think a lot of something that I'm concerned about with this team is they've lost a lot of institutional knowledge. Again, it's not like Nikola Vucevic and Evan Fournier and Aaron Gordon had accomplished a lot, but they know how Steve Clifford works. They have a familiarity with the coach. And I feel like something that I'm concerned about is getting back to where the team was beforehand. They don't have guys who have been there before that can give little tips and things to watch or things that the coach is looking for. And so, I expect them to keep Michael Carter-Williams. I think that he's a really good leader and a really good veteran to have on the team. Terrence Ross, obviously, I think he's been a little bit more productive than Gary Harris. He obviously accepts that bench role, which I think is huge. So that'll give another, young player maybe an opportunity to start or an opportunity to get some more minutes. But more than that, he knows what Steve Clifford likes. He's been successful with Steve Clifford. And I think, and more specifically, been successful with Steve Clifford in Orlando. And I think that's really, really important for a young team that's going to be trying to figure out how to play for this coach again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a mutual feeling. I think we've discussed this topic a couple of times, and that always is the answer that we come down to. It's Terrence Ross, the guy that you want to keep here. And we've said it multiple times on Twitter. It's, lifetime contract for Terrence Ross for so many years now. We want to see that play out. And I think he's a guy who, again, like you mentioned, is willing to come off the bench and add something that we need in that shooting that, again, we currently don't have. Unless things change in the offseason, he's a player that we want to keep in Orlando.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that he's our longest tenured Magic player on the roster.
He's the only player left that Rob Hennigan acquired.
That's it.
Crazy. All right, next one. Brighter future. Chuma Okeke or Cole Anthony?
I think it depends what you're looking for. I think there's a better chance that Chuma Okeke contributes to a winning team, if that makes sense. I think you can clearly see a space for Chuma Okeke on a championship team. I think before the season started, I thought that he would be on the all rookie team. I thought he was going to surprise that many people. And I was even more pleasantly surprised by how he played this year. Cole's going to get you your points. He's going to score. I think there's always going to be a little bit of that score streak in him. And I think his defense is always going to leave a little something to be desired. But I think that Okeke is going to find himself on a winning team. And I think at some point in his career, probably find himself on a championship team if he keeps kind of progressing in the way that he looks like he's progressing. I mean, everyone calls him baby Kawhi. I don't know about that, but at the very least, he's a 3-and-D guy. I already trust him to be a 3-and-D player for this team. And again, it's maybe not saying much that he's a great shooter on this Magic team, but he's a good shooter on this Magic team. I think you can spot him in any role and he's going to accomplish it very, very well.
Yeah, as a fan, it's really difficult not to fall in love with your players. And I hope that both of them, they're able to contribute to a winning team, and please make sure that it's with us, not with other teams. Man, let's make that championship team here in Orlando. Who would you say would be in Orlando longer, RJ Hampton or Mo Bamba? And the reason why we bring this up is that there's been a lot of talks that we felt as if RJ Hampton may or may not be the odd man out in the event that the Magic did want to move up.
So I think it's going to be RJ Hampton. I think that there's a very real chance the Magic move Mo Bamba this offseason. And again, I think for Mo, I think he needs a new voice in his head. I think you look at how Wendell Carter moved to Orlando. He had a bad situation. I mean, he had a bad situation in Chicago. They kind of lost some faith in him. His confidence was shot. He moved to Orlando and it completely changed his outlook and completely changed how he played and how he looked. I think that for better or for worse, fair or unfair, Steve Clifford's opinion on Mo Bamba has already been made, and it's going to take a lot to change it. And so I think for Mo, he just needs a fresh set of eyes on him. If he wants, I mean, and maybe this is more too much doing a favor for someone. And, again, from everything I understand about Jeff Weltman, he's usually pretty upfront with people and pretty straight about people and caring about the people on the roster as much as the player. And so I think that for Mo, the best thing for his career would be to move on to another team. And I hate saying that because I like Mo. I like some of the things that he's done. I think that he's been dealt a really bad hand on numerous fronts. That kind of pushed his development to the side when he really needed the chance to kind of make mistakes and grow up a little bit. Injuries didn't help. The Magic becoming a winning team didn't help either. To be frank, I think that he would have been a lot better on a team that wasn't playing for anything late in the season, where he could again make those mistakes. And we saw what that looked like at the end of this season, where he was able to kind of put up some points and gain some confidence and look good. But I think that Mo just needs kind of a change of scenery. And it would not surprise me if that happens this offseason.
Next one for you, Phil. Who meant more for the franchise? Tracy McGrady or Dwight Howard?
Fans will probably tell you it's T-Mac. I think it's Dwight Howard. And as I'm thinking about the answer to this question, it really just comes down to the fact that when T-Mac was here, the team almost moved. When Dwight was here, they got a new building that assured the team would be here for the next 20 years. We're coming up on it's been 10, 11 years. So we're coming up on, 9 years away from the Amway Center lease coming up. People forget how close the Magic were to moving when Tracy McGrady was here. It was really close.
Yeah, they were saying Kansas City, was it not?
It was Kansas City and St. Louis, I think, were the two cities that were vying for it. Rich DeVos had put the team up for sale, and it really felt like the team was gone. And it got really, really close. And again, Tracy McGrady is Tracy Mcgrady is a Hall of Famer, all-time talent, on the Mount Rushmore for Magic history, a Florida guy, all-time fan favorite. Fans know that the team did him rotten, that John Weisbrod specifically did him rotten. And everyone knows that his leaving was not his fault. As much as everyone hated it in the moment, I think everyone's come to understand like that was not his fault. Like he was dealing with a lot of stuff that a superstar should not have to deal with. And the Magic just did not learn any lessons on dealing with stars from Shaq. But Dwight Howard, I would argue that Dwight Howard was part of, certainly two of the three best teams in Magic history, if not the two best teams in Magic history. I don't think the 09 team is better than 95, but he was part of the longest sustained run in Magic history. You look at it, the Magic had been obviously out of the first round in 95 and 96. The fact that the Magic got out of the first round in 08, 09, and 10, that's obviously the longest the Magic had been really good. The playoffs they made and the belief that the Magic had that they could win a championship, that's as close for as long a time as they've ever gotten to the title. And I think the 2010 team was as close as the Magic have, 95 was probably maybe a little bit closer, but the 2010 team I think is the best team in Magic history. And I think that Dwight played a huge role on that. And honestly, I know that fans are still a little bit sour on Dwight Howard, but the guy just, he set every record in the history books for the Magic. Like I think that you can make an argument he's the best player in franchise history. And I'm hoping that time heals those wounds and that, when Dwight retires and he makes the Hall of Fame, because he'll be a Hall of Famer because of his time with the Magic. I joke that, Tracy Mcgrady is probably the first player that's in the Hall of Fame because he was on the Magic. Dwight Howard will be the first player where it is undisputed he is a Hall of Famer because of his time with the Magic. I hope that by the time that happens, fans are ready to forgive him and welcome back home.
Yeah, and just thinking about it, Kansas City Magic doesn't have a ring to it.
No.
St. Louis Magic doesn't have a ring to it either. Just doesn't sound right.
No. And considering that Orlando is past Miami as far as television market size, staying in Orlando was a good move for the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. So this last one, Phillip, isn't necessarily this or that, but it was a conversation that Al and I had earlier this morning. So around social media, there's been a lot of posting an image of a logo of an NBA franchise and then asking, what's the one player that comes to mind when you see this logo? When you take a look at the Orlando Magic, if you were able to stamp just one face to represent the Orlando Magic in its entirety, who would you select as that one player for the Orlando Magic?
I think it's Shaq. Shaq obviously kind of transcends sports. And with the Magic certainly transcended sports. I mean, I've talked to Jeff Turner a little bit about what it was like to be on those 95 Magic teams. And, he said it was like being with the Beatles. Like it was just crazy. Everywhere they went, people loved Shaq. I mean, this was not just a team that was popular in Orlando. This is a team that was popular everywhere. Like Shaq made the Magic a national brand. Like, I don't know if you guys have talked to the Magic UK guys, but something that was really fascinating for me since I really started, blogging and writing seriously was that, the Magic have a very passionate fan base in the UK. And a lot of that was because Shaq went to the UK with the Magic in 92. They played the Hawks his rookie year. And that made so many people in the UK Magic fans. That was the only basketball they really saw. That was their introduction to basketball. And, I think that still, you talk about those 90s teams, they made a freaking documentary about the 95 Magic. There are a few teams that you could make a whole documentary about. And again, there was a lot of interesting stuff about that team. And that movie was really fascinating to watch and kind of reflect back on what that team meant. But that was all because of Shaq. And I think it'll always be difficult to get out of that shadow. I mean, honestly, the Magic are still making mistakes because of their experience with Shaq. They're still trying to kind of recapture everything they had with Shaq. This whole idea of getting the number one pick, it's because the only way the Magic have been successful is because they got the number one pick with Shaq. The whole Dwight Howard saga was because they didn't want to repeat the mistakes of Shaq. Literally, they made every mistake they could because they were too afraid to make the mistake with Shaq, the same mistakes they made with Shaq. They were just they knew they had a Hall of Fame center and they were like, we're not going to let this thing go because we know how hard it is to get it back. And they made a whole bunch of new mistakes because Dwight Howard is not Shaq, to say the least. But Shaq, someone, I forget, I was on some type of podcast or something, and like someone made this comment, and I'm sorry, I'm not citing who said it. Someone made this comment that, we don't know who the best player in Magic history is yet because we haven't drafted them, because they haven't delivered the Magic a championship yet. And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about things, for sure. But the only way the Magic are going to get out of Shaq's shadow is to win a championship, is to have someone that leads this team to a title. And then that player will probably, everyone talks about retiring jerseys, and I resisted that idea for a long time. I think the Magic Hall of Fame needs to be more prominent. I don't think it's done as well as it could be. But I used to believe that, we don't need a Hall of Fame. We don't need to retire jerseys just because everyone else does it. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You have your own way to understand and celebrate your history. But now that, Nick Anderson's name has gotten erased from a lot of the record books, I do think that, we need to retire jerseys. We need to make sure that fans who didn't watch these players play understand how important they are to the franchise and what they mean to this organization. And, but Alex Martin's, said we have criteria for retiring jerseys. He never closed the door to it. And very clearly the first criteria is that they win a championship, because championships are what matters. And if that's the case, we're always going to be in Shaq's shadow, because he was the one that got this team and this franchise closest to a championship than any other player, than any other person. And until that next person comes along that is able to lift this team to a title, this is Shaq's team, as much as it sucks. And as much as the Magic botched everything with him, that this is Shaq's team.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. I didn't include Shaq for the simple reason that I feel that it's kind of, what's the right way to say it? It's kind of like, I feel as if it's almost a little bit of backwash. With the statue that they created in LA, the statue that they have in Miami. I even, although we drafted him, and although the times, as you mentioned, were memorable,
he'd go into the Hall of Fame as a Laker.
Exactly.
Like baseball, like the Baseball Hall of Fame has the ball caps and for the team that they're most known for. Shaq goes into the Hall of Fame as a Laker. Like I said, Tracy McGrady, and I had this debate with the Houston guys. Tracy McGrady to me is the first Magic Hall of Famer. He's the first player to go into the Hall of Fame because he was on the Orlando Magic. But honestly, I think Houston can dispute that a little bit. So this young franchise is still looking for the guy that is their Hall of Famer. Like Grant Hill's a Hall of Famer, deserves to be a Hall of Famer. It ain't because of what he did with the Magic. Patrick Ewing, I think, was the first player with Magic associations to be in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he's not in the Hall of Fame because he was on the Magic. So, no, for sure. Like Shaq is not known for being primarily known for being on the Magic, but I guarantee if you flash the original Magic logo on screen, the first thing people are going to say is Shaq and Penny. So maybe it's Shaq and Penny. Maybe it's those two that really define this franchise. But, you look at the decisions that this team has made really since Shaq left in 96, Shaq's shadow is over everything. Like you can't escape him.
Yeah, I think it's about time that happens, and let's start doing that by this draft. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's make this draft. This is the best player the Magic will ever have.
All right, Cunningham jersey getting retired. Cunningham jersey getting retired at the Amway about 20 years from now. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
All right, Phillip, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show, man. It's really a joy. Can you please share where everyone can listen to the podcast that you have and also read some of your articles?
Yeah, for sure. The best place to find me is, if you want to listen to my podcast, it's Locked On Magic. It is a daily Orlando Magic podcast, and we do mean daily. I usually post episodes 4 to 5 days a week. Even in the off season, I'm still going strong right now, or trying to. My episode tomorrow will probably be a little bit later in the day. But you can follow me there by searching wherever you download podcasts for Locked On Magic. You can follow my writing at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Follow me on Twitter. The site's website, or the site's Twitter account is at @OMagicDaily. I do a lot of interaction there. I love answering questions and talking with Magic fans. And you can also follow my personal account at PhilipRR_OMD. That's Philip PhilipRR_OMD.
Daily. How do you do it daily? That is crazy. We struggle to find contact for 1 week, and you do 5 weeks.
There are days where I don't know. And, like I work nights, so there are a lot of late nights cranking that thing out. I'm trying to go to an afternoon recording set, or like late morning recording session, so I can try and pretend to get some sleep now that the season's over. This season was rough. let's just put it that way. This season was really rough.
Yeah, for sure. Phillip, thank you so much. Locked On Magic, Orlando Magic Daily. Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Magic fans. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the OZone Pod. And remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.